Are you an HVAC professional looking to set your business apart? Then the Leading HVAC podcast is your go-to resource. I'm Kimon Hines, coach and trainer at SBE. And in this podcast, we'll share stories of success and struggle from leaders in the HVAC industry. You'll hear from experienced executives, managers, and innovators, providing you with the hard-earned insights from their journeys. These insights will equip you with the knowledge you need to navigate challenges and truly lead in the ever-evolving HVAC world. Welcome back to another episode of the Leading HVAC podcast. I hope you got that. The Leading HVAC podcast. I'm your host, Kimon Hines. So excited about today's episode because I get to share the episode and to introduce to you a friend of mine, someone that I deem the most interesting man in the universe. But you're going to hear so much more about him during this episode. I want to share with you and introduce our guest for today, Chris Horne. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Kimon, thank you very, very much. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm glad we could get the schedules to coordinate and align perfectly so we can spend some time together. So I'm looking forward to it. But
Awesome. Awesome. Well, those of you who are viewing this, and if you're leading in the HVAC world, you know how busy it is. So as Chris mentioned, it takes a while to get busy people to connect. We did it today, and I'm excited to dive into today's episode. So Chris, let's start off with this. Who is Chris Horne? Tell us what you do. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
yeah, so again, it's Chris Horne. I'm a coach and trainer with SBE, but I also have the privilege of running an HVAC organization that I'm co-owner of. That's Horne Heating and Air Conditioning based out of North Carolina. And we have a residential business that I've been a part of for now 18 years, second generation, and just really excited to see what's happening and how the business is growing and developing more and more as I spend more and more time in coaching and training with SBE. So it's quite the difference that most people would think. So it seems like the more I step away, the more the business grows and develops. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, Chris, as you said that, we're going to dive into that because I'm sure someone watching or listening to this, they want to know, how can my business grow with me stepping away more and doing less? And so this episode, if that's your question, this episode is the one for you. Well, Chris, we want to know, how did you get into the HVAC world and how long have you been in it?
Yep. So I got recruited by my business partner, who's also my cousin. So I laugh and say that he did a great job selling me on the fact that we could combine forces and be together in an HVAC business. So my previous life was in corporate real estate and facilities. So I learned a lot about the dynamics with people and communication, finance, and I had several remote locations that I had to manage ultimately. And what really happened, Kimon, is I got burned out. I was traveling a ton and I didn't spend much time at home and was very, very career focused. And I just needed a change. So it took about 18 to 24 months of conversation back and forth with John and myself. And then we rolled the dice 18 years ago. And my wife, Darcy, and I relocated to North Carolina. And it's been a roller coaster ride since then in the HVAC industry. So just didn't know anything about HVAC other than, hey, my house is warm or my house is cold. And through the last 18 years, I've been able to learn not so much on the technical side, but all of the things that are required to actually run a business. And one of the life lessons is surrounding yourself with people that can help the business run itself, so that not only myself, but my business partner can step away more and more. And that's really what our focus is now, is what can we do to develop the next generation of leaders that can take the business to the next level, to the next step, or whatever that case may be.
Awesome. So Chris, 18 years ago, or barely even longer than that, right? John started the recruiting process. Finally, 18 years ago, you made the decision. When you first jumped on board, started in the process, what were some of the things that you were doing right away? Like, so you came in immediately. What were some of the things you were doing right away?
Yeah, one of the things that we really focused on to begin with was to stop running the finances or the business like a checkbook. Most business owners in this industry go, hey, you know what? I've got money in the bank. We can pay our bills. We're doing okay. And a very hard lesson, because it took about 2 years to really dive into the financials, which is something, we coach and train on at SBE, and to understand what the balance sheet should look like, the P&L, how we can have KPIs. And about the time we got that all settled, the great recession of 2008 hit. So we had to really back up and shrink the business a little bit. So those were really the two key areas that we tackled first and foremost, was getting the books and the finances in order, and then overcoming that recession back in '08.
Yeah. You probably thought, what a time for me to relocate, come and join this new business, and boom, right? Like the bottom falls out of the economy. Now, you mentioned finance is one area you worked in. Kind of walk us through some of the other areas. Now, we know those of you leading in HVAC, you wear a lot of hats. So, Chris, walk us through some of the hats and the roles that you've played in your business.
Yeah, there's really not a role I haven't done outside of being a service tech or an installer. I have done some ride-alongs, admittedly, but I'm normally the person that's just going to be handing the tools to the professional. So outside of the technical piece, I've done dispatching, so I understood how that needed to work. We've done a lot of software integration and changing, CRM platforms, implementing financial software like moving to QuickBooks. But I guess from a people perspective, have gotten really skilled at identifying team members that would be a good fit for our company. And that's been ongoing. And we really didn't get, as a group, collectively good at that until probably the last 2 years. And that's really what I think, if I could roll back the clock and say, if I could do it a little bit differently, it would be making sure we've got the right people on the team, and then having those right people in the right seats. So there's really, like I said, not much I haven't done. And I think through the course of the last 18 years, being able to have folks that we've identified, and some of which have been with us that entire time, and say, all right, here's the perfect position for that individual.
Yeah. So, Chris, sounds like you're a talent. You know how to put the right people in the right seats. By the way, you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you at the end. So I'll have to find another question for you later on. Just quick question here. Like you said, you did all these roles. Was there any that you really enjoyed more than the others? Dispatching, any of them that you just really liked? Not that you have to go back and do it, but any that you just liked?
Yeah, there was one in particular that I think John and I worked really well. So back when the recession hit, we really pared down the team. I think we had maybe 6 service technicians. We had 1 dispatcher. We had 4 install crews, and just a couple of other ancillary kind of floater positions. So my role was not only all of the accounting piece, but I was also the project coordinator or install coordinator. And I thought that was a very interesting position because of the customer dynamic on the front end that the salesperson had established. And in our case, it was John. So the two of us, then I would take it and put the pieces together on paper to then deliver it to the install teams to go and execute. So seeing how that sometimes a tumultuous relationship between the promise maker as the salesperson and the promise keeper as the installers, kind of being that go-between, and then also that liaison for customers. So even now, when we've got some questions that pop up with installation coordination or project management, I'll still get asked a few things. And even though I've been long removed from that day-to-day grind, it's still kind of embedded in me to bridge that gap.
Yeah. So, Chris, you say you have an eye for, and I think it's okay to say that you know where people go into the right places. But what would you say are some of the qualities to make a good leader in this industry? What are some of the key qualities?
Yep. I think the 3 main things is the individual needs to be patient, right? Some folks say it's got to move quickly. It's got to change quickly. We have to be at a certain level at a certain time frame. Goals and objectives are fine, but we have to be patient with the unknowns that can pop up day to day, right? I think with that patience comes a bit of forgiveness, because we're going to make mistakes, and we have to make sure we don't hold those grudges or hold that over someone's head that might keep them from developing in whatever role they're a part of. And then I think solid leaders ask a lot of questions to uncover what problems we're trying to solve or what problems we're overcoming. But more importantly, what can we do by asking questions to help those individuals who are seeking guidance or who are wanting to make that next step into leading a portion of the organization, so we can uncover what their strengths are.
Those are 3 big qualities there. Well, just looking at yourself, would you say those are qualities that you had when you first started, or you developed them, or what's the mix of that? Because someone might think to themselves, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm watching this podcast, and Chris, I don't have those, or these aren't my strengths. How do I manage that?
That's a great question. And Kimon, that's a learned trait or a learned skill set over time. And two things come to mind immediately. By nature, I am just a doer, task driven. Let's get the check the boxes. Let's move on. We've got to cover this. We've got to fix that. Precision, I guess, is one way to think about it, particularly in the financial world. What's been amazing though is that I had this opportunity to start coaching and training with SBE, which has been it's about 2.5 years now. I've realized that I've picked up a lot of skills that help me run the business and do it from a 30,000 foot level instead of a 10-foot level. So I think that's one of the biggest things is being able to realize that, you know what, it doesn't all have to run through one or two or three people. If you've got dedicated employees and they know what the goals and objectives are that have been set by the leadership, then we can empower those individuals to help get those goals. And we, as owners, stop being the bottleneck. That's probably the best thing I can think of. So in that process, being patient, I've become way more patient over 18 years. And I think just as I get older, right, my perspectives have changed. So it's not every waking hour is devoted to the company at this point. And that's also refreshing in many ways, quite honestly. And then to just ask questions to see what I can do to help coach and develop those folks that actually do the operations day in and day out.
Yeah. So it sounds like that curiosity, that willingness to ask questions has been a part of your own personal development and your development as a leader, which has helped the company to develop itself.
Yeah, it definitely has because, as I think you mentioned, working your way out of a job, right? That's kind of the goal and objective of most business owners. Like, hey, I've worked all of this time and put all this dedication, this blood, sweat, and tears, and I want to get to a point where I can enjoy life, right? That's really kind of the goal that we hear a lot. Now, I've got other business owners that are in the same mindset. The most difficult thing to do is let go. And once you do it, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be errors. There's going to be times when we second guess ourselves and go, wow, I should really just be more involved in this. But I think if you can be patient as you let go and watch what happens, you'll identify very quickly if you've got the right people on your team. And when you've seen that, when you've witnessed it, when you experience that progress, then the idea is to just continue to fan those flames so that fire stays lit and those individuals just continue to do more and more and more.
Yeah. Our guest today is Chris Horne. And Chris, we want to talk, you just mentioned it, working yourself out of a job. Chris, there came a point in time when you were able to step away from being as hands-on. Talk about even the mindset and the thought process before that. When did you start even thinking about, I don't want to be as involved, and then planning for that? Just kind of talk us through that so that someone else can model that.
Yeah. That's probably 4 or 5 years ago. The business was kind of in a solid pattern, but we weren't really making much traction, as I like to call it. We would kind of, you'd have a great month and a great year, and then you'd have an off month or an off year. And we did an acquisition in 2020, which is very challenging, but also very rewarding. And after that, I started thinking, you know what, there's more to this than just being in the daily grind and being behind the desk with my head down, crunching numbers or dealing with problems or handling customers. So I really started doing some soul searching to say, what can I do to remain engaged and still be, just excited about going to work every day. And so I started to change my mindset a little bit to think more of visionary type stuff. Is there another acquisition we could do? Is there something else I could continue to pursue that is outside of the service industry or the HVAC world? And that's really, the ball started rolling, and then started having conversations with Will Smith at SBE. And over about a 6-month period, that developed into turning the tide a little bit into coaching and training. But it was really just that feeling of, we've got it to a level of X. To get it to Y, I'm going to have to either work twice as hard, or we're going to have to find a way to overcome some of the challenges, because one person can't do it alone. And that's when it kind of clicked. Probably 2021, 2022, we're all battling COVID during that time period as well. And it just felt like the wheels were spinning for me as a professional. And so a couple of years after that, was able to just kind of let go. That's really what I equate it to.
Yeah. Now, most people, I'm going to tease you, Chris. Most people who think about working themselves out of a job don't think about getting another job, right? But you did. And I think what I want our viewers, our listeners to understand is, working at SB isn't the only thing that you do. You have a pretty balanced life. Just a couple weeks ago, you came back from a mission trip. So you have designed a way that you are able to enjoy other parts of life. And so kind of talk to us about how are you splitting your time between working at Horne and all the other things that Chris does?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of things there. I look at both jobs, if we call it that, as a vehicle to be able to do the things that my wife and I are really passionate about. And so it comes down to just kind of being organized, Kimon. And again, having flexibility though, when things aren't 100% right. So I've got set days that I'm doing Horne heating and air conditioning work. I've got set days when I'm doing SBE work. And sometimes the lines get crossed and sometimes things have to change, but both organizations, if you will, kind of know what the priorities are. And then we know when we can press the gas pedal or press the brake pedal in either one. And so while they're both super important, what I really focus on now is trying to see, okay, what can we do to just help society in general? And that's really why I have that passion with the coaching and training is if I could just help one or two business owners overcome problems that it took us 18 years to figure out, and if they can do it in 18 months, their lives are going to be that much better. They'll be able to walk away a little bit faster. But just serving the community is huge for us. And two major things have really come to play is my wife and I have started a nonprofit. So we're really excited about that and getting that off the ground, which helps us further be a vehicle to our mission work in Guatemala. And then along with that, we've got some local students here that we partnered with and call them lunch buddies, right? And we're able to see them through year after year of a school that we sponsor and partner with and just watching those kids develop. And so that's really what keeps me moving. And like I say, these positions, these careers that I've had that I'm juggling right now are the means for us to be able to do those things.
Yeah. Because that's such a great point. I think as a leader, we sometimes, and that it's good for us to talk about this on this podcast, we sometimes only look at ourselves in the role that we have, and that's what our life becomes about. But it sounds like you have a bigger why for yourself, and your role as a leader at Horne is a part of serving that bigger why. And I think for some of us as leaders, maybe we have not tapped into what our bigger why is, right? Kind of talk to us about maybe if I'm listening and I'm watching this and I have not figured my bigger why, what is some advice you'd give me?
Yeah. I think just take some time and reflect a bit and just determine what is it that you really find joy in doing that's not related to any kind of work or any kind of job, right? And I think as business owners, because I don't think this, I know it, you get caught into the grind and it's like this thing will not move forward. It will collapse. All of the fear that we have as business owners is there. And it sometimes prevents us or binds us to the company itself. And that's where you can kind of break free a little bit and determine, all right, is there one or two things I'd like to do that can really help me overcome some of this? And for me, it was being involved in some mission work and just figuring out, okay, we can take some time and Kimon, we take the mission trips in the hottest time of the year. And so to be able to have the freedom to do that and not be so stressed and worried that things at home, so to speak, are going to collapse, it's very comforting. So you don't necessarily have to jump into the deep end like that, but just pick 1 or 2 days. And I know we've shared with some folks that just started small. They said, you know what, I just don't want to go into the office on Fridays. And the first 2 or 3 times that happens, it's going to be uncomfortable. And then you're going to realize, oh, wow, this can really take place. So I think it goes back to finding what you're truly passionate about. And if it's coaching a little league sports team, or if it's being a tutor at a school, or just, serving the community in some way to make, this world a better place and be that salt and light that we're called to be. I think that's where it starts, and that spark will get there. And then at that point, you can figure out how to maneuver your time to where that can become the priority.
That's good. Now, Chris, someone's watching this and they're saying, but if I leave my company, everything will fall apart. Sounds great for Chris. He may have a great business, big company, a lot of employees. But if I leave, I need to make sure I have my phone, right? I can't go on vacation. So talk to them about, because we're talking about working yourself out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any challenges for you along the way? And just walk us through. Maybe delegation is a challenge. If it's a challenge for me, what would you advise me as a part of this working myself out of a job?
Yep. I think you'd have to prioritize what would be the most important thing you can try to delegate or offload to someone else, but still keep an eye on it, right? We have to trust but verify. That's what I always say, but be willing to try it. We, over the course of 18 years, we delegated a lot of things and kind of let it go. And then it went unchecked because we didn't do a good job verifying what we had entrusted someone to do. And so sometimes it backfires, but more often than not, it will be a success. But you just have to make sure it's kind of like riding the bike, right? With the training wheels. When the kid's first learning, you got the training wheels on, they're a little bit wobbly, and we can take the wheels off. They're going to crash every so often. And that's kind of what we need to do with those pieces of our business that we want to delegate or let go of. So you're not tethered to a phone, you're not tethered to a desk. And it's certainly going to take some growth and some planning and strategy with having either people that are already with your organization identified as those that could take some of those things off the owner's plate, or we have to find those individuals who could then help. But I think the most important piece of that is to figure out, okay, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 things that if I, as a business owner, could let someone else handle on a day-to-day basis, then it would free me up to do other things or pursue other passions or just not be so overwhelmed.
That's good. I like that. Chris, you've really helped talk us through delegation. And if I am wanting to live a life I'm not tied to my role, I have to design that and even dream about that life, create a vision for that life, and then work backwards from there. Let's kind of use this next question as a story time. If you could tell us a story, maybe some unexpected obstacle or challenge that you had in your time leading at Horne and how you navigated it, just anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, there's been several things, and it mostly revolves around personnel. So anytime you have a separation or someone leaves the company, be it voluntary or involuntary, there's oftentimes this sense of fear, like, oh no, they had so many keys to the castle, so to speak, that it's going to crumble, right? The reality is is that we oftentimes are again, go back to that fear of we can't afford to lose these people or we can't afford to have these situations. So one in particular is we had a GM that had been part of the company for a very long time. And we had gotten to a point, John and I, where we realized that was not the right person for our organization. And it took a lot. We weighed the pros and cons over and over and over. And once we made the decision to part ways, we thought, you know what, this could be detrimental because there could be a lot of techs, a lot of internal team members, a lot of people could basically throw their hands up and say, we're done, because there was such a strong relationship with that one individual. What we discovered through that process is, even though we were fearful of it happening, once that change was put in motion, and after kind of the dust settled, if you will, the majority of people were like, thank you. So the story there would be sometimes those bad apples, right? They're rotting and we don't know it. And I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, right? Because we all have challenges in our personal and professional lives, but that is really one of the keys where we can be fearful of saying, you know what, in my heart, in my soul, in my mind, this is not the right person. But if they leave, or if we make a move or a change, it's going to crumble. And reality is that may happen with 1 or 2 individuals, but with our instance, it was a turn within the organization that really kickstarted things at that point, because we realized it was just a bad vibe, right? It was like a dark cloud, and everyone was like, I'm glad that move was made. You should have done it like 2 years ago.
That's good. Good story. That's good. I think that's a good encouragement for someone who may be sitting on a difficult decision.
Yep.
I think fearing what will happen if I do it. And it might be time to exercise some courage and make that decision.
Yep.
So Chris, I've heard you say this, that there are times you go to Horne and there are people who've been hired that you didn't know, right? So I'm going to ask this last Horne related question. What does Chris Horne do at Horne right now?
Yep. So it's funny, Kimon, I don't even have a desk or an office.
Oh, this is definitely working yourself out of a job.
So typically what I do is I'll go in and whoever I'm able to see, just a good morning, how are things? I'm not a big small talk kind of guy, so I will at least try to go around and go into the different rooms, training areas and so forth, and at least make contact with everyone. And then at that point, it's just kind of saying, okay, what are the priorities today from a business owner's perspective that I need to be focused on? And so we'll check the scorecards, from our CRM. How are things doing? What's our reporting look like? And then we'll start building an agenda for our weekly leadership meetings. And then I may pop into a training session, or I may pop in and just observe our call center, and, just working closely with our resource and planning manager to see if there are any personnel things that need to be addressed at a very high level. And then spend a lot of time in interviews and recruiting, and just trying to figure out who that next person may be. And oftentimes, like you mentioned, I'm not sure what the status is. I'll see a hiring email and it runs through our payroll system and those types of things. But we had an all company event last week, and there were literally 3 people I'd never seen before in my life. So it's very rewarding, but it's also like, wow, this thing is really starting to take off. So my day kind of varies, and it may be a phone call. It may be like a customer that's known me for a long time, but it's more of just getting a finger on the pulse of the entire group, and where might I be able to help, or better yet, just ask a few questions to see how things are going.
I love that. And I'm sure someone right now is like, I want that. I want that, to be able to not have to know everything, but to have a level of confidence that things are running smoothly, even if I am not doing everything or running everything.
Yep. And we tie it back to the financials, right? That's kind of how we started this conversation, with getting those organized, because that's really what I focus on. And I had a funny conversation with another contractor the other day. He said something to the effect of, well, I log on to my bank account every single morning to see what's there. He goes, what about you? I said, man, I can't tell you the last time I logged into the company bank account. I said, but I'll go to the balance sheet, because I know we've got processes in place and people working that system that I trust the numbers. And when the numbers tell us we're moving in the wrong direction, that's when we can go to work and say, okay, what are the priorities and how are we going to overcome this?
Yeah, I love that. Chris, this has been a great conversation about preparing for and planning for, really, the life that we all wanted when we started our business. I don't think anyone started a business to continue working as hard as you did when you first started. We all started so that we can step back and enjoy life and the fruit of our labor. Now, I want to kind of end with what we call our rapid fire questions. These are questions you can answer in 30 seconds or less, or do your best, right? Like, we're not going to have a timer on you. But this is just to help us grab some nuggets as leaders as we end off this podcast. So are you ready for those?
Let's do it.
All right. What's the best business book that you've read, or the best business resource that you've put your hands on?
Best business book I've read was The Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink and Leif somebody. That's a great book. We read it as a group, and I really love how he tied in the military stories to practical business settings.
I know someone else, one of our coaches, is a huge fan of that guy, and another book that he has called Extreme Execution.
Extreme Leadership.
Extreme, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, all right. That's one. That's a good recommendation. Can you say the book one more time for our listeners?
Yeah, it's The Dichotomy of Leadership.
Awesome. Okay. What's one thing you want to be better at as a leader in the next year?
I think more proactive management. Even though we've got a lot of good things going, I'd like to start looking ahead 2 and 3 days, 2 and 3 weeks, and seeing what we can do to help my organization just become more proactive than reactive.
Nice. I love it. We've kind of talked about this a little bit. What do you do to de-stress when you feel like quitting? And what are the top ways that you enjoy your life? So your balance of life and business.
I love to be in the outdoors. So I'm part of a peer-led workout group that gives me a ton of relief with guys. We run around in the early morning hours around town, do some half marathons, do some crazy events like that, but also enjoy kayaking. So if I can get out in the kayak or get out on the mountain bike, that's a big stress reliever.
Nice. All right. So you answered this earlier, but I'll still run it back to you and maybe give you a little more time. If you could go back in time, and you can change your answer or keep the same answer. If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you would have given to yourself when you first became a leader at Horne?
Yep. I touched on it already, learn a little more patience, right? But also learn that the work, the job, the company, it can't be your primary focus in life. There's more to it than that. And I think many contractors and business owners just think this is all I can do. I'm tethered to the phone, I'm tethered to the desk, I'm tethered to the business. But in reality, you can step away from that. So if I could go back to 2005 and talk to the Chris Horne of that day, even though it's a lot of hard work, and I get it, I completely understand that. Don't make that such a focus that you miss other aspects in your life. It might be your children, it might be your family, it might be opportunities to take a trip. It may just be something you could do to make a special memory. So that would be my biggest piece of advice I would give myself if I could roll back time.
Thank you. But Chris, that piece of advice is so good. It was worth repeating. Those of you who are watching this episode, this is definitely one that you need to share with someone else, another leader, someone else on your team. And if you have not subscribed to our new podcast, we need you to do that. So subscribe on if you're watching this or if you're listening to this. And we want to encourage you to continue to lead and to live the life that you want to. Thank you for listening to the Leading HVAC podcast. If you would like to learn more about SBE, you can find us online at sbeodyssey.com. That's sbeodyssey.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a review on this podcasting platform. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.